What is up, everyone? How are we doing today? It is March 19th, 2026, and today I'm going to be going over today's price action. The one trade I took, it was a loss, but the idea was there, so I don't regret it at all. Coming into the day, we were in a really weird position, and honestly, I didn't even have an entry opportunity to like 10:30. So a little bit later than I usually like to trade, but without further ado, let's get right into it. Before we get into the video, I just want to say, like always, every single morning, I post my daily bias on my free Discord. This Discord isn't out yet. However, I am launching it very soon, so stay tuned for that. And I take screenshots of these and I post it on my Instagram story. So if you're not following my Instagram, go ahead and follow that. I'll put it up right in the screen. But that's that, and let's get right into it. Now, coming into the day, I was leaning bearish. And why is this? Well, obviously, we are delivering from our buy side liquidity and we are clearly trending downwards. And you can see we've been getting these similar V-shaped setups for the past week. And when we zoom out, we can even see that we're still trending lower. And I'm on the 4-hour time frame right now. And as you can see, we did have a bullish fair value gap right here, but overnight, our 6 a.m. candle ended up displacing through that. And now that we have a lot of conviction and a lot of displacement with this candle, that price is going to continue lower. Right here at this 4-hour swing low, this is a major liquidity for me. Obviously, if we're just looking at the charts, we can see that price is clearly magnetizing and wants to take out this low. And if we even go below us, we have more equal lows below here, which we can also target. And our order flow is incredibly bearish. Look at how much displacement we're getting through each candle. And as you can see, we have all these bullish fair value gaps that are just getting completely ran through. So we clearly want to push down. However, this is all on a higher time frame basis. And if we were to switch over to bullish order flow, right here, we have a 1-hour fair value gap. So I would love to see price retap into this. Or we also have a 4-hour intermediate high right here, which is another great target. Now, at market open, I was specifically looking for two things. Number one being if we trade into this 4-hour intermediate high, we can take shorts either down to this swing low, or we could even push further down to these equal lows right here. Now, if we decided to trade lower at market open, I would want this 4-hour fair value gap right here to either get disrespected or displaced through. If we end up closing below this, I would love for price to reach this liquidity. Or more preferably, we end up tapping into this gap, sweeping this low, and then taking longs off this. However, the only situation I would take longs is if we had very great displacement and we ended up switching to bullish order flow, because right now on a higher time frame basis, I am incredibly bearish. Now, I'm never going to rule out the possibility of being bullish, and one thing that actually adds conviction to potentially being bullish on a lower time frame is this SMT formation right around here. And if we hop over to ES, we can see that this hasn't been taken out. However, it most likely is, and ES is probably going to sweep this before NQ does, just because it's the leading asset in the scenario. And honestly, it looks a lot cleaner than NQ right now. Now, hopping onto the hourly time frame, we can see we were in a very similar position as the 4-hour time frame. We do actually have this hourly bullish fair value gap right here. I don't know if you can see it on the screen. Let me move this over. So right here, we actually do have an hourly bullish fair value gap, but honestly, this gap is so tiny, and look at this displacement we're getting. Like this is incredibly bearish, and honestly, I do not think this will hold, and it will probably get displaced into, even though we are just trading into it right now. And this is market open. This is 9:29, and our 9:15 candle actually ended up wicking in this hourly gap. And honestly, if you did want to go for a 1-for-1 off of this inverse, and then ends up closing right here, like you could have tried to target these equal highs or even here for a 1-to-1, and it did play out. But honestly, this is something I would never take. This is before market opens. This is pre-market, and our overall conviction is so bearish that you can literally see we are just all trending downwards. So it didn't really make sense for this, especially off of a 1-minute inversion just tapping into a small hourly gap. But honestly, if you did take this for a 1-to-1, I mean, it's not bad. It's just something I wouldn't take. It's more of a risky play and something I really didn't have conviction in. And with my rules, I'm very strict with them, and I just don't trade pre-market at all. However, I know that some of you guys watching this do trade in pre-market and potentially can take advantage of the market open manipulation. Now, on the 15-minute time frame, we did create a bearish gap here with an intermediate high resting here. So if we did end up tapping this and taking shorts down to this gap, I wouldn't be opposed to that. And our 9:30 candle displaces really low. We get a little bit of accumulation here, and then we get more distribution to the upside. Now, there was one potential entry for this opening long, and honestly, I did not take this trade. Why? Because my overall bias for the day is incredibly bearish. I really don't have any conviction that we are going to go bullish. And right about here, there was a 5-minute gap right here, which we ended up inversing. And this play wasn't bad if you wanted to take longs up to this. You could have either just targeted this swing high for a 1.3 risk reward, or you could have targeted that 15-minute intermediate high that I was talking about earlier. But if we just take a look at this, like, we're not really crossing any major key levels or have any conviction that price wants to go bullish. Yes, did we tap into this hourly gap? We did. However, This gap is so minuscule, and looking at the overall hourly candle displacements, like our moves to the downside are so big. It's not real chop, it's just pure displacement to the downside. So I really wanted price to go lower, and on a higher time frame bias, that's what price was doing, you know? And with market open, I'm usually trading based off a higher time frame bias. Obviously, as we get deeper into the session, if we ended up reversing to a bullish order flow on a lower time frame, then okay, I might look for longs. But in this case, like there was just not any real conviction for me. So with this trade, I think it actually ended up did playing yeah. So if you took this trade, you can obviously target that 1-1 around here. You could have targeted the swing high, or you could have held on to it to the 15-minute intermediate high in that 15-minute gap that I wanted to see price trade into originally, right? So this was that first long entry opportunity. Honestly, like it ended up playing out and it was cool. However, just my bias for the day, I wanted to see price go down. I wasn't really trying to take longs. And honestly, just tapping into an hourly gap that was that minuscule with no real displacement just didn't give me any conviction or desire for price to continue higher. However, it did end up tapping that gap, which is what I wanted to see. And the reason I wanted to see that is because I wanted to take shorts off of that. When I'm entering a trade, I look for multiple things. I look for a higher time frame bias. I see what we're bouncing off of, and I look for gaps to take entries off of. And over here, we were very bearish, and we did have this 15-minute fair value gap. This is literally like one of the only gaps we had in this leg. And I just wanted to get that tapped, as well as we had that intermediate high right there, and we ended up sweeping that. So I wanted to take shorts off of this. But one other thing I want to mention about this trade is that it did play out, but it took a long time, right? Like we didn't get our TP until what, 11 o'clock, 11:05. So it was almost an hour and a half of just pure chop, just trying to reach the upside. So yeah, this was a good target. This is where I wanted price to reach a lot earlier so we could take shorts off of it. But just know if you were in this trade, it was for a while. And honestly, if I were to have taken this trade, I probably would have had my break even some point around at the swing high or here, and I would have gotten broke even. And honestly, I would have been a lot happier than that than having to wait this long for the trade play out. Because if your trade isn't playing out when you want it to, then it's just not probably going to go there. And luckily, it ended up going there. Excuse me. Luckily, it ended up going there before we ended up getting stopped out. But honestly, like that's something I would have not personally done. If I'm waiting like an hour or 30 minutes for this trade, it's probably not going to play out. So I'll just have my break even and move on to the next one. But majority of people would have targeted that 1-1, and that ended up playing out. So now I'm still looking for more entries, more potential shorts. So after that played out, let's get into the trade I took. Like I said, my bias for the day was very bearish. However, on this lower time frame, we cannot deny the existence of this bullish order flow now. We had our 9:30 open, we manipulated down, and we are clearly pushing up to this 15-minute gap. I know I've repeated this a million times, but it's so crucial because this is the main understanding. This is how price works, right? We have different magnets that price wants to attract towards to. And in this case, I don't want to say I broke my rules. However, I traded based on intuition and overall conviction and just time spent in the markets. Like I know that maybe we didn't reach this key level yet, but I didn't think we had to, right? We already traded up so much. We created all these gaps here. I didn't want price. Like price didn't have to retrace all the way down into this hourly gap for us to go up. We could have easily just kept accumulating right here and then pushing up. And that's something that you need to understand. And this honestly comes with just time in the markets and everything. Just because there are key levels that haven't been hit doesn't mean they necessarily will be hit. And right now here, like we can clearly see we're displacing so much higher. And at this time, at 10:20, I didn't even really care if price wanted to trade back here. I just wanted to see price continue up. And we did end up creating a 5-minute fair value gap, which we did tap into. And that is one of my conditions. Usually I'm looking for price to bounce in 5 or 15-minute fair value gaps, and then I'll take trades to the upside. That is exactly what we did here. We tapped into this 5-minute fair value gap, and what ends up happening right here, we have a 1-minute. Originally, I was on the 30-second because I was looking for 30-second changes, but luckily we ended up getting this 1-minute gap right here. And what ended up happening is that the next candle over, I believe, yeah, the next candle over completely displaced through. We got decent displacement on that candle, and this is where I took my long. I had my longs up to this 15-minute, and then I had my stop loss at this gap. And what ends up happening, literally the next candle, we get stopped out. This is the fastest I've been stopped out in my life. Um, just completely ran through, just completely, absolutely, completely obliterated. And honestly, this wasn't a bad trade at all. We were clearly on a lower time frame bias going bullish. We created our 5 minute gap. We ended up re-sweeping and re-tapping into it, and we wanted to take longs off of it. However, it just didn't happen, and that's okay. And the only reason I took this is because a lot of times when we're in a range like this, and wait, my drawing tool just glitch. A lot of times when we're in a range like this and we already start displacing so high past the equilibrium, I don't necessarily need time. I don't necessarily need price to tap into a higher time frame like a 1 hour to see continuations long, right? Like there's no reason for price to come all the way back down just to go up. I would have much rather taken a 5 minute right here. We tapped into this gap, and what happens? We want to take longs off of that. That is a lot more aligned with my model and how I trade. So this trade was something I really wanted to see play out. I did have lower risk on this just because I knew that we did have the hourly bullish and that if price ended up wanting to tap into it, we can still go higher from there. So I didn't really risk a lot on this. And honestly, I'm not mad at it at all. It just didn't end up playing out. And what actually happens later in the session, which I'll show you the next trade, is that we end up tapping this hourly gap. And what do you know? We ended up taking that 15-minute high. It took a while. It took till like 11 o'clock, but it ended up playing out. It just was such a long range. And usually I don't really be liking to trade at these hours, like anything from like 10:30 to 11, just because that's the end of AM session and volume isn't there nearly as much as market open. Obviously, it differentiates with like if you have red folder news at 2 p.m. or something like that. But in this case, we didn't have any red folder news. I think we had some 8:30 news, but it was very minimal and not important. But yeah, like it ended up playing out, and honestly, that's what I wanted to play. We tapped our hourly gap and we took it to the upside. And even in the beginning of the video, when I came in with my daily bias and when I showed you the Discord, like that's what my daily bias wanted to happen. We just didn't get the correct entry, and that's okay. At least the idea was there, and at least we were able to accurately predict what price wanted to do. And honestly, that's just what's important to me, like knowing that I can predict where price is going. That's why I started this. It's just like the love of the game, I guess. You either like it or you don't. I don't know why I like it. I'm weird, but yeah, I guess it's genetics or something. Now, I was just looking for a retrace to the upside, and we ended up retesting back into this hourly gap. And the thing with the markets is that you have to be very reactionary, and your overall biases and desires for the trades you want to take are very much so gonna change during your intraday ranges compared to your pre-market analysis, right? On a higher time frame, we are clearly trending lower. I showed you that. On the 1 minute, look at this order flow. This is extremely bullish. We manipulated lower past this gap, and now we are trending upwards. Yes, we are coming down, but it looks like we're just retracing into this hourly gap, which we're going to take to the upside. So that eventually our major move is going to take us all the way down. So market just accumulates. We really don't get anything until about 10:20 when we actually started dumping. And right now we started dumping back into this hourly gap. And now this is my time where I'm going to look for an entry. We ended up tapping this hourly gap, showing that, okay, price wants to go back up. We can clearly see that our overall trend, our overall range, look, we started at 930 down here. We are clearly pushing up. We want to take out this high so that eventually we can go lower, but we need a higher time frame gap or key level to get hit so you can go lower, right? I doubt the price is just going to go here and continue lower. We haven't hit anything substantial. We haven't hit any key levels. We haven't traded into any gaps. That is not what price does. So now on my lower time frame bias, I'm incredibly bullish. I really want this gap to get swept. And what ends up happening is that hourly gap I was showing you before, right here, we never disrespected it, right? We just tapped into it at 9:30 and then manipulated back up. However, now we're manipulating back down into it, and I'm just looking for a retap to give us more long opportunities. And what ends up happening, we ended up tapping into our gap. And originally, I was looking at the 30-second, and I had my 30-second inversion. I was waiting for that closure. However, we ended up forming a 1 minute, which is even better. And I believe on the next candle, we ended up closing through. Yeah, and look at this candle. Look how much we displaced through. That's beautiful displacement. We had our stop loss back at this gap. And honestly, you could have targeted these equal highs. You could have targeted a 1-to-1. Usually, I like to target equal highs. That's one of my favorite targets of all time. However, in this case, I targeted that 15-minute intermediate high because that's where I just had overall conviction price was going to go. It was very clear that we wanted to trade into this gap. We needed some form of confirmation that price needs to go lower, and we weren't going to start dumping lower without tapping into something and without hitting that key level. So now that I found my entry opportunity, we had our hourly bearish gap get tapped into again. We had a 1 minute inversion and we inversed that candle. And looking what price does, we just end up shooting up. Right here, honestly, I would have broken even, right? We pushed above this 50%. We tapped into this bullish gap and we didn't end up closing above it yet. So once we tapped into that, that's when I had my break even, and that's when price just got completely stopped out. But if we were to end up holding that, you can see we ended up tapping into that 15-minute gap, and that is what I wanted, right? That is the whole overall execution of the trade. That was the main idea. And you can see it plays out, right? This is perfect. We tapped into our bullish gap again, that clearly on our lower time frame changed our bias for the day and wanted us to hit this high. And yeah, that's that trade. It's really that simple. There isn't too much more to go off of. But yeah, that's everything. That's the trade recap. Obviously at 9:30 we had that open move, that long. Not too much of a fan of that. I really didn't take it. However, I know a lot of people did. Good job with that. That second trade completely crushed. Good thing we didn't risk a lot. We have to be smart about risk management and all these things. So it was very important that we were able to identify that, okay, in a lower probability scenario, we can afford to risk a little bit less instead of trying to go for multiple contracts. And that third one just played out flawlessly, right? That was a great one. But I didn't end up taking that. That just wasn't in my playbook. I was off the charts. I was like, bro, I'm done. Um, but yeah, don't get off the charts early. That's why. But lesson learned. Honestly, that trade, I had nothing wrong with it. I would take that again tomorrow, the next day, every day of the week. That was just a good trade in my opinion. It didn't play out. We wanted to see a more of a retracement back to the hourly gap, which we did end up getting, and that played out. But you never know. You can't. There's no 100% accuracy. There's no 100% win rate. Sometimes things just happen. But what matters is that you learn from your lessons and you don't make the same mistakes twice. So that is all. It's 1 p.m. right now. I know this video isn't going to come out too early. I would have ideally liked to record it earlier on, like when I just finished, but I had something I had to attend to, so I couldn't. And now I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to try to get this uploaded as early as I can for you guys. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. If you guys like this content, please like, comment, subscribe, follow, whatever it is. Anything means the world. And thank you guys. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.